When most people think of Elvis Presley, they think of Graceland, the jumpsuits, the screaming fans, the movies, the records, the legend, the king of rock and roll. But my family remembers a different Elvis. Not the icon, not the superstar, not the man standing on stage before 20,000 people, just Elvis. The young man who came to visit my Aunt Bonnie Mosby, the same Bonnie that Elvis Presley would eventually propose to, the same Bonnie portrayed in the 1979 Elvis movie starring Kurt Russell, the same Bonnie who remained friends with Elvis for the rest of his life. Some of my family's memories of Elvis happened far away from concert halls and movie sets, because when Elvis would visit Bonnie, he would sometimes sit and sing to my grandmother. No crowds, no cameras, no spotlights, just Elvis Presley singing in a family home. Those are the stories history books rarely tell, the stories that reveal the man behind the myth. Tonight, we're exploring the Elvis Presley most people never knew, and the remarkable connection between the king and my own family. To understand this story, we have to go back before Graceland, before Hollywood, before the white jumpsuits, before Elvis became Elvis, back to a poor boy growing up in Mississippi. Born on January 8, 1935, Elvis Aaron Presley entered a world still struggling through the Great Depression. His family had very little money. His father worked whatever jobs he could find. Life was simple, sometimes difficult, and nobody could have imagined what the future held. But one thing shaped Elvis from an early age: faith, church, gospel music. Many people know Elvis as the king of rock and roll. Far fewer realize that gospel music remained one of the deepest loves of his life. Long before the records, long before fame, long before Hollywood, there were church pews, hymns, revivals, and gospel quartets. Those sounds would stay with him forever. Years later, Elvis often said his favorite music was gospel music, and perhaps that tells us something important about who he really was. Every great story has people behind the scenes, people who help shape history. For my family, one of those people was Bill Black, my cousin, and one of the most important figures in early rock and roll. Bill Black became Elvis's original bass player. He stood beside Elvis in the earliest days, before the fame, before the fortune, before the world knew his name. Together with guitarist Scotty Moore, Bill helped create the sound that changed music forever. Imagine being there. Small recording studios, tiny audiences, no guarantee of success, no promise of fame, just a group of young musicians chasing a dream. History remembers Elvis, and rightly so. But Bill Black was there at the beginning, helping create the foundation of what would become one of the greatest careers in entertainment history. And according to family history, Bill Black would also become the link connecting Elvis to my Aunt Bonnie, a connection that would alter all of their lives. Her name was Bonnie Beatrice Mosby. Most people have never heard it, but Elvis certainly did. According to family history, Bill Black introduced Elvis to Bonnie. The two developed a close friendship. Over time, that friendship deepened. The young superstar and the young woman from Tennessee spent increasing amounts of time together. This wasn't the Elvis the world saw. This wasn't the Elvis on stage. This was Elvis away from the cameras, away from the reporters, away from the screaming crowds. Just a young man spending time with someone he genuinely cared about. And according to family accounts, Elvis eventually proposed marriage. Think about that for a moment. One of the most famous entertainers in history, a man who could have married almost anyone he wanted, got down on one knee and asked Bonnie to become his wife. And Bonnie said no. History took a different path. The king would never marry Bonnie, and Bonnie would never become Mrs. Elvis Presley. Yet what happened afterward may be even more remarkable, because the friendship never ended. In fact, it lasted for the rest of Elvis's life. Years later, this chapter of Elvis's life became known beyond family circles. When the 1979 television movie Elvis was produced starring Kurt Russell, Bonnie appeared as a character in the film. Think about that. Out of all the people who crossed paths with Elvis Presley, Bonnie's role in his life was significant enough to become part of the story being told on screen. For many viewers, it was simply another scene, another character, another chapter in the Elvis story. For my family, it was personal history appearing before millions of television viewers. The woman on the screen wasn't just a character, she was family, and the story being told wasn't merely Hollywood, it was part of our family's connection to one of the most famous men who ever lived. One of the biggest problems with fame is that people begin seeing a symbol instead of a person. The public knew Elvis Presley, but few people truly knew Elvis. The private man, the friend, the visitor sitting in a living room, the man who would sing songs to my grandmother while visiting Bonnie. That's a side of Elvis most fans never experienced. No elaborate stage, no television cameras, no security, no celebrity image, just music, just friendship, just ordinary moments. Those moments matter because they remind us that behind every legend is a human being, a person with hopes, dreams, relationships, friendships, and struggles. Even the king wasn't immune from that reality. While Elvis and Bonnie's friendship continued, the world around them was changing rapidly. The young singer from Tupelo was becoming a phenomenon. Records exploded across the charts, crowds grew larger, the headlines became impossible to escape, teenagers screamed, television appearances generated controversy, parents worried, preachers debated, and suddenly Elvis Presley wasn't simply a musician anymore. He was becoming a cultural force. Everywhere he went, people wanted a piece of him. A photograph, an autograph, a moment, a conversation, a glimpse. The world saw opportunity. The world saw success. The world saw fame. But people close to Elvis saw something else: pressure, responsibility, exhaustion, isolation. Because fame often gives people everything they thought they wanted, while taking away many things they never realized they needed. Normal friendships, privacy, peace, freedom, the ability to simply be yourself. The bigger Elvis became, the harder it became to escape Elvis Presley. Life does not always unfold the way people expect. Bonnie had a decision to make, and she chose a different road. Rather than marrying Elvis Presley, she eventually married songwriter Charles Underwood. From the outside, some people might wonder why. Why say no to one of the most famous entertainers in history? But life is rarely about fame. Life is about people, character, purpose, faith, family. The decisions we make when no one else is watching. Bonnie made her choice, and Elvis respected it. There was no public feud, no dramatic ending, no bitter separation. Instead, something unusual happened. Their friendship endured. Years passed, careers changed, lives moved forward, yet they remained connected. In a world where many friendships collapse under far less pressure, theirs survived decades. That alone says something about the bond they shared. Most Elvis documentaries focus on the public image, the concerts, the records, the movies, the gold suits, the headlines, but the private Elvis was often very different. Those who knew him personally frequently described someone who remained remarkably approachable despite his fame, someone who enjoyed ordinary moments, someone who loved laughing with friends, someone who enjoyed music whether there was an audience present or not, someone who remained deeply interested in spiritual questions. Many people don't realize how much time Elvis spent reading, studying, searching, thinking about life, thinking about God, thinking about purpose. The public saw confidence, but Elvis often wrestled with the same questions many people do. Why am I here? What really matters? What happens after this life? Can success truly satisfy the human heart? These weren't questions a superstar was expected to ask, but they were questions Elvis often explored. Because fame can buy many things. Answers aren't one of them. One of the most overlooked parts of Elvis's life was his search for meaning. Even after becoming one of the most recognizable people on earth, something inside him continued searching. He read books on spirituality, studied different ideas, talked with friends about faith, asked difficult questions. Yet throughout his life, gospel music remained close to his heart. Many of the people closest to Elvis believed that the church experiences of his youth never truly left him. Even when the world called him the king, there remained a part of him that remembered those early gospel songs, those revival meetings, those simple church services. Sometimes the things that shape us earliest continue shaping us forever. And perhaps that is one reason so many people still find Elvis fascinating, because beneath the celebrity, he remained human. As the years passed, the demands never stopped. Concerts, appearances, expectations, schedules. Millions of people wanted something from Elvis Presley, and carrying that burden year after year takes a toll. The world continued seeing the legend, but privately, challenges were growing. Health issues emerged, fatigue increased, the pressures accumulated, yet the public image remained. Because when you're Elvis Presley, people expect Elvis Presley every single day. August 16, 1977, the news spread rapidly. Elvis Presley was dead. Millions were shocked. Millions mourned. An era had ended, or so it seemed. Because even after his death, the story wasn't finished, the legacy. Today, decades later, people still talk about Elvis. His music still plays. His influence still echoes through modern music. His image remains instantly recognizable. Entire generations know his name despite never seeing him perform. Very few entertainers ever achieve that. But for my family, Elvis is remembered differently, not only as the king, not only as a cultural icon, but as a friend. A man who spent time with Bonnie, a man introduced through Bill Black, a man who once sat in a family home and sang to my grandmother. Those memories exist outside the headlines, outside the documentaries, outside the mythology. And perhaps that is where the real story lives, not in the legend, but in the moments that reveal the person. History often turns people into symbols, heroes, villains, icons, legends, but every legend begins as a person. The story of Elvis Presley isn't simply the story of a musician. It's the story of a poor boy from Mississippi who changed the world, a man who achieved extraordinary success, a man who searched for meaning, a man who experienced friendship, love, disappointment, and hope, and a man whose life crossed paths with my own family in ways few people would ever imagine. The world remembers Elvis Presley as the king, but every king eventually leaves the stage. Every concert ends, every spotlight fades, every earthly achievement becomes part of history. Jesus asked a question in Mark 8:36. For what shall it profit a man if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul? That's a question far bigger than fame, far bigger than music, far bigger than celebrity. It's a question every one of us must answer. Because at the end of life, what matters most isn't how many people knew our name, it's whether we knew the one who gave us life. Until next time, keep asking questions, keep seeking truth, and stay rock solid.